Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, class, I want to say. I'm Pat Doré, Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair, and I want to welcome everyone to the kickoff meeting for 2017, our first of the year Bureau Advisory Group meeting. I hope everyone had a nice holiday season. I know mine was fairly enjoyable, except for the fact that I got a brutal cold or flu at sometime right before the winter break, but feeling like I've recovered, and I hope everybody else has had a nice, restful, and peaceful, and happy holiday season. I know we've got a lot on our agenda today. I know we've had a very busy end as the Bureau of Automotive Repair is concerned to end of the 2016 year, and already a kind of a hectic, crazy start to the new year. We're tackling it with vim and vigor, and looking forward to working with this group and others with some very interesting and challenging projects over the course of this next year. We'll talk about some of those with some of the presentations that are slated for today, and I think there's already people are so excited about the things that are going on this year that they've already kind of laid out some projects for discussion at our April advisory group meeting. Before I continue with some very important announcements that I want to make, I would like to go around the room and do the introductions of the advisory group, and then I'll also introduce a few of the Bureau of Auto Repair staff. Can we start on the far end, Drew?
Yes, my name's Denny Bowen.
Denny,
I'm with Automotive Maintenance and Repair Association.
John Gallo with California Automotive Business Coalition.
Gregory, AAA.
Tracy Renee, the Automotive Service Councils of California.
Brian Moss. My name is Elisa Reinhardt, and I'm with the California New Car Dealers Association.
Jack Moladonov representing the California Auto Body Association.
George Ritz from the California Automotive Teachers.
Keith Going, Southwest Regional Manager for ICAR.
Jonathan Morrison, Auto Advisory Services.
I accidentally pointed to Denny as Drew. Drew Carlson has, I guess, is stepping down as a representative for California Automotive Teachers on this advisory group, and I suspect we'll be hearing soon from them about a replacement for his position on it. Also want to let everyone know we got a nice treat from our Director's office here at the Department of Consumer Affairs, Deputy Director Christine Lawley. Thank you. She says, Happy New Year and thank you, Bar Advisory Group. Hope 2017 is your best year yet. Heart, Christine, DCA. And a picture of her lovely, I think this is her dog. Somehow she's made it almost like a cartoon of her picture of her beautiful dog. Here's some treats to pass around. Hungry? Thank you, Christine. Introductions. I just want to point out a few people from the Bureau of Automotive Repair. Assistant Chief Doug Bellotti, if you could just raise your hand or stand up. Yes, thank you. Good to see you, Doug. I'll also make a few announcements of some people you're used to seeing here who are not here. Let's see. Where's Dennis Hayes, Deputy Chief? Dennis Hayes, or Deputy Chief Dennis Hayes. Program managers, Rick McClarty over Northern Operations, Jaime Ramos over Southern Operations. We also have Bill Thomas with our, what are we calling it, a case management group, essentially. We also have program managers 3 joining us. Is it, let's see, I'll start with, we've had a little bit of a restructure. Mike Sacco over what we call Region 1. Region 1 is now comprised of the 3 Bay Area offices and Sacramento. That would be South San Francisco, San Jose, and Hercules. Tim Bowden. Region 2, overseeing, going down through the valley, Fresno, Bakersfield, Valencia, Culver City. And our third program manager, Region 3, Matt Gibson, overseeing the South Almonte, Riverside, Irvine, and San Diego field offices. Did I get that right, guys? We used to have 4 overseeing those 12 offices, and we had a restructure where we moved some additional staff and resources from the Field Operations and Enforcement Division, effective January 1st, into the Bureau's roadside and audits group, gas audits in particular. You know, we've got the aging Bar 97 units, so definitely want to fulfill our commitment to get out to inspect the equipment and make sure that they're fully functional and being used and properly calibrated, obviously to make sure that we have consistent tests from vehicle to vehicle, and then obviously from station to station. So George Urena, a program manager with the Bureau of Automotive Repair, along with that restructure, is assisting us now in that group, the gas audits and roadsides unit. So where we formerly had 4 program managers overseeing or helping the field offices, we now have 3. And those 3 report to both Jaime and Rick. The other big change that we had is we have a lot of movement in our front office. As I announced at the last advisory group meeting, Dan Povey retired at the end of the year. I have some good news that I'll share with you with respect to Dan shortly. We also saw the departure of Sabina Knight, who is our deputy chief for administrative functions. That's our licensing division, our unit, excuse me. Our consumer assistance program for the Smog Check program. That's the vehicle retirement and repair assistance operations. What else? Contracts, personnel, business services, all the facilities management. Sabina has taken on a new assignment with the department at the professional fiduciaries bureaus. All of her wills and trusts experience will obviously come in handy with that program. Dennis Hayes, Deputy Chief for the Smog Check operations. And by the way, Sabina left at the beginning of the year, so that position is currently vacant. And Dennis Hayes will be returning to the Department of Consumer Affairs at the beginning of February. So we will have a completely new front office at the Deputy Chief level that I am currently recruiting for. One of the positions, Dan's position, has already been filled. Tim Corcoran, and for those of you who didn't see the announcement this last week, Tim Corcoran, who was a program manager for a number of years with the Bureau of Automotive Repair, and most recently went to the Department of Motor Vehicles in their occupational licensing division. He was a chief of that division. He will be returning as deputy chief. He was the successful candidate in that recruitment for Dan's vacancy. And we're very excited to have Tim joining us once again. He brings a wealth of experience. He's been working on, for those of you who still have been working with him because of the automotive issues that he's still kind of attached to at DMV, he's been working on the Google Cars regs and other autonomy vehicle related issues. The ignition interlock devices, we'll talk about that a little bit in one of the presentations coming up shortly. That's the devices that are required to be put on vehicles and for those with a DUI conviction. Tim's been working on that as chief of that occupational licensing division at DMV. So very excited to have Tim joining us again. He was, before he left for DMV, he was with the Bureau's Field Operations and Enforcement Division. He was also a program manager over the Consumer Assistance Program and a number of other duties over the course of his career and experiences that'll be very, very invaluable to us as we move forward this year and beyond. What else? The other two deputies, as I mentioned, we'll be recruiting for. We're actually actively recruiting for those positions right now. There's an announcement that has been out there for about a week and will be through the end of this month, I believe. We'll look to have those positions maybe announced by the end of February and someone on board for both those positions by mid-March. That's just, I mean, that's fast. For anyone who doesn't know the state system, that'll be groundbreaking to be able to get something done within the next couple months here. But in the interim, I've brought back and am bringing back a couple of people who have some experience and history with the Bureau of Automotive Repair. Patty Wool has come back as a retired annuitant to help us with some of the daily operations and the recruitment for the deputy positions and other positions. Before retiring in December 2015, Patty was my deputy for administrative functions. When she vacated, then Sabina took the position at the beginning of 2016 or late 2015. Let's see. Who else? Dan Povey, I mentioned. I got some good news about Dan. Dan's going to be coming back to the Bureau as well as a retired annuitant. I was successful in justifying his return as a retired annuitant to help us with some special projects. Namely, I'm really interested in Dan taking on the legislation that did not go through last year, AB 873 and Senate Bill 778, one of which was signed, AB 873, but 778, Senate Bill 778 was vetoed. They were joined such that if one didn't go through, they both didn't go through. Dan will be helping us on a commitment we made, and I'm very interested in, we've checked with our folks here that we would like to try and attempt to do something through regulation for the things that we believe in those bills that are very, will prove valuable to our role as a regulatory agency, protection of consumers, and also beneficial to the industry. Some things that I think we'd like to get ahead of before we see any attempts at legislation that might potentially water down the Automotive Repair Act and things that have been in the statutes for 40 plus years. So we're going to look at, and Dan's going to take on that special assignment. He also, if we are up for sunset review, as we might be this year, that comes about approximately every 4 years, he will also be a lead in that effort, working with others in the Bureau, but kind of coordinating some of that enforcement responses to some of the issues that'll come up in that process if the Bureau is subject to it this year. So that's kind of it for changes. One person, I know there's others in the audience who I didn't introduce, but you'll see as they come up with presentations. But I did want to point out our legal counsel, Gary Duke. Thank you, Gary, for being here. My right-hand person that if you need anything about my calendar, he knows it better than I do, Sergi Elmorchetti. And Charlie, he's on my staff apparently. I'll get to you in just a second, Charlie. All right, that's it for the major announcements for 2017. We're very much, like I said, very excited about the new year and the challenges it brings. But I think working together, as we always have, we'll get through it, and we'll lay out a course, a roadmap for getting through this year, and helping all of us improve what is already a really great industry, a great environment for consumers, and just continue to improve on that. Any questions before I turn it over to the Department of Consumer Affairs for their quarterly update? No one from the advisory group? Okay. Charlie. Is your mic on?
Yes, Mr. Dre and committee, I'm Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals representing motorists. And I had a little announcement I wanted to make as well as a comment to your comments, Mr. Dre. And we'll start with just a little announcement. I got a phone call from somebody who has quite a history over time. Probably most of the people in this room don't have any idea who I'm talking about, but there's a guy by the name of Caleb Bud Swanson, who was the guy that made all the retrofit devices for the older cars, was heavily involved in the creation of Smog Check and a major aerospace company, and many of those folks ended up being part of the efforts to create centralized testing all over the country, et cetera, and he was a major player there, passed away this past week. And a person was just a fascinating individual, went to 10th grade, and had a huge impact on our issues, many of which I agreed with, many of which I did not. But I just wanted to share with some of the old timers that Caleb is now on to better things. Second thing I wanted to mention was I found it interesting that possibly significant efforts are being moved to roadside as well as auditing in the stations. But I did not hear anything about the possibility of finding out if what's broken gets fixed, if we're actually performing and fixing the things that are wrong. And an auditing process, I think, could be a huge contributor to improving the performance of the program, and certainly would highly encourage that to be a part of the agenda as to where we're going as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments, and thank you for letting us know about the sad news about Bud Swanson. Not to be confused, obviously, with Bud Rice. Bud's not Bud Rice. There you are. There's two Buds. I didn't want people, when I didn't see you, I thought people might be, and I'm sorry, but I didn't. I'm not to make light of. I just want to make sure people didn't hear Bud and think our friend Bud Rice was something that happened. Good to see you, Bud. Thank you, Charlie. Those audits are specifically focused on the equipment. That would be a different group in the Field Operations and Enforcement Division that certainly, not to take argument with the good comment that you made there. This group specifically will be focused and has been focused on the equipment itself and the audits of the performance of the equipment, not the individuals necessarily performing the inspections or the repairs. That's more in the vein of and under the purview of the Field Operations and Enforcement Division. But a good comment. Thank you. All right, can I now move along to, by the way, we did add a half hour to this agenda because we have a very busy agenda. In fact, there were a couple of things that I had to remove and push to April's meeting just because we have so much that everybody wants to hear from and talk about. And it would be a very long day if I allowed it to go the entire day. We do not have any workshops scheduled. We're probably going to have, and it's going to be timely to have some in April, but the regulations, just all of them are kind of at a point where we've already had public workshops on the ones that needed them, and there's some that are still kind of early in the stages that aren't ready for prime time. But I suspect that will be different in April with our next meeting. I did have to remind everyone, thank you, Zach Richardson, letting me remind everyone that this meeting is being webcast, and any comments or if participants through the webcast want to make a comment or have a question, you can send that through bar meeting. It's all one word, BAR, meeting, at dca.ca.gov. Again, bar meeting at dca.ca.gov. Sorry, Shelly. Shelly Jones from the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Director's Office, the Executive Office.
Good morning. Happy New Year. As Pat mentioned, I am Shelly Jones, and I'm a Board and Bureau Relations Manager in the Executive Office here at DCA. And I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to provide you with some updates on activities happening at DCA since your last meeting in October. As we roll into 2017, the Governor has released his proposed 2017-2018 budget, which was released on January 10th, and he will be delivering his State of the State address on January 24th at 10 a.m. His address will be available to watch via webcast through the California channel if you'd like to tune in. On January 13th, Governor Brown appointed Jolie Onodera as the Deputy Secretary of Legislation for the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. Prior to her appointment, Ms. Onodera served as the principal consultant for the Senate Committee on Appropriations. And also, as we begin a new legislative session, several of the DCA boards and bureaus are tentatively scheduled for their sunset review hearings on February 27th and March 6th. And as you know, the Bureau will be undergo sunset next year, as your sunset date is currently set at January 1st of 2018. On October 27th, the department hosted its annual distributed costs review and open house for executive officers, bureau chiefs, and board presidents. This meeting provided an overview of the department's budgeting process and how costs are distributed to all boards and bureaus. Following presentations, attendees were able to visit with staff from each of the department's individual units to learn more about the services provided by the department, as well as have access to the individuals that run these units. The department has released its updated guide to distributed costs and services, which outlines the budget process, how costs are distributed, and the services provided by the department. And that's available if you'd like. DCA's Office of Professional Examination Services, also known by its acronym of OPES, performs all aspects of the examination validation process, including occupational analysis, examination development, test scoring, and statistical analyses, and audits to DCA's regulatory entities. OPES and the Bureau are working together on examination development and occupational analysis activities currently. The Repair Tech occupational analysis has been completed, and the validation report documenting the process and results is being printed for distribution to the Bureau. While the occupational analysis for brake and lamp is scheduled to start in July 17, however, it may begin as soon as May of 2017, depending upon the availability of subject matter experts. The inspector examination development workshops have been scheduled for February through June of this year. The department's annual report is available on our website. In it, each board and bureau, including BAR, notes its major accomplishments for the 2015-2016 fiscal year, as well as new laws or regulations from the 2015-16 fiscal year extending through the 16 calendar year. It also includes licensing and enforcement summaries, staff information, and more. This concludes my update. Thank you for all your help, and if I have any questions.
Jack.
Jack Molodanoff. I do have a question on the sunset review. You mentioned the boards and that you oversee, and did you say? I just want to clarify. Did you say the BR will be up for sunset review next year or this year?
The sunset review date is currently January of 2018, so you would be going through sunset review hearing process in. Actually, you know what? I will have to double check on those dates. Let me double check on those dates for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the advisory group? Okay, Charlie, hold on. You got someone from the audience.
Charlie.
Yes, Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. Had the great honor and privilege of meeting with the director and a couple of deputies and Ray on issues that have to do with improved performance of the program, specifically two proposals that were being considered by the Bureau of Automotive Repair. One is the possibility of moving a audit or a flag and doing a smog check that notifies the provider of the smog check currently before any testing is done. That original proposal was to do that after all the entries are made, but before the certificate is issued, and we think that could make a very significant improvement in overall program performance. Second issue was the labels on cars have information that many people are not aware of. There's been some very significant efforts to improve the information availability, et cetera. But still, in doing the smog check, there's not a requirement there that the technician looks at the label and sees that there's things there like PZEV or things that are have warranty requirements. And we think that that could be entered into the smog check documentation. So that would mean that the technician would need to look at that and would significantly raise the possibility of the cars that need repair actually getting fixed, and the fact that they're covered under warranty. And those issues that were discussed in that meeting, we have not heard any feedback. We think those are critically important to the performance, environmental impact, and the survivability and sustainability of the Department of Consumer Affairs, and it's a major funding mechanism. We think they need to have, if at all possible, significant improved consideration to the possibility of deciding whether it's appropriate to address those issues.
I have a response for that. Two important developments on both those issues. I'll start, which one first? I'll start with the issue on the, I don't know what you called it, but the check on the
Flag or
the flag, if you will. We do have a presentation coming up. I think it's item number 7, Paul Hedgeland. It's specifically focused on OBD vehicles. Obviously, that's the 70% of the fleet that we're testing. I'm not sure if there's any developments being thought of currently for some of the older vehicles, but definitely on the OBD vehicles being inspected, there is a flag, essentially a certificate blocking mechanism designed to fulfill the statutory requirement in AB 2289 from calendar year 2010, Mr. Eng's bill. So looking forward to that presentation. That'll be our intent is to try and fulfill a large part of what you're talking about with that specific comment on the flag during the smog check. The other issue that as you noted, was brought up in that meeting with the director and myself and a few others from the department was your interest and our interest in giving consumers more information about vehicles and the warranty requirements with respect to the various model years out there of vehicles. And we've got a kind of a beefed up vehicle inspection report that will have a pretty lengthy message. I hope it doesn't lose consumers, but it is in the interest of having full disclosure about all of those issues and working closely with the Air Resources Board. Charlie, Bud, you were at the meeting on some of the wording of that message, and knowing that we only have so much space, I think we did a pretty good job putting together a message that will be informative without losing the consumer, and also fulfilling some of the other requirements that we have, which is to, when someone fails a smog check, letting them know about the fact that they may qualify for repair assistance or could potentially retire their vehicle if they're interested through the Consumer Assistance Program. So all that information is in a new vehicle inspection report message that will be, we were hoping, rolled out shortly after the advisory group meeting today. I actually had the message and was going to read it, but I left it in my car. I don't know if someone else has it. We might be able to read it at a certain point later in the meeting, but it's in large part because of the focus that Charlie, Bud, Tracy, you've been very interested in this, giving information about to consumers about the warranties for these vehicles before they've gone and invested a significant amount of money in repairs that might have been covered under the warranty. Yes, Charlie.
The issue of information off of the label, so that the technician does in fact have to pay some attention to what the certification, the status of the car is in that regards, did not seem to be a part of what you're discussing, and I think that's really needs consideration to raise the awareness of what we're dealing with here, and I'm really not trying to promote cars going to the new car dealer and be getting repairs for free, whatever. That's not my issue. The issue is we think that there's a whole lot of cars that should be being fixed, they're not getting repaired. The aftermarket service can take care of them just as well. But if we don't know, and when we started this program, we couldn't find anybody that even knew what a PZEV was. The car that I'm currently driving, when I picked that up and I'm talking to the fleet manager, he covers the warranties when he tells me about the car. Doesn't mention PZEVs. I asked a whole bunch of people in that dealership and subsequent dealerships. Nobody could even tell me. I found one guy that was a detail guy that knew something about PZEVs. So that's really important for somebody to at least have an awareness of what they're dealing with. And currently, if the technician is not required to take a look at that label and see what he's got, it's going to continue to be ignored, and I think that needs to be considered.
All right, I'm not aware that they aren't doing that, but okay, we'll look at that as an issue for possibly folding into the smog check inspection. I thought that was part of the visual inspection requirements, looking at the labor to make sure that the parts that are supposed to be on the car are actually on the vehicle. So anyway, Shelly, thank you very much.
Yep.
I appreciate your attendance and very informative presentation. Thank you. And we'll get back to everyone about the status of the sunset review. I think we're still kind of not sure as well, even though we may be slated this year. There have been prior sunset reviews that where the Bureau has, I think, not been on a 4-year schedule. So it's all kind of dependent on what the committee, the Senate Business Professions Committee, and whoever else is involved in that process can take on in any given year. Okay, I forgot one other important change in our office. Nina Tantropol left the Bureau a couple weeks ago. She took on, she got promoted. We're very happy for her. She is now with the California, is it Gaming Commission? Gaming Commission, yes. And she's going to be handling regulations for them. Very good development for her. Unfortunately, that leaves us at a loss with our regulations experts, so we're madly putting together a recruitment. Actually, we're now posting and advertising the vacancy and hoping to fill that position fairly soon. In the meantime, we've got a host of individuals. Patty's kind of helping out on some things. Shelly, sitting to her right, Shelly Whitaker, and Tessa Miller in the back. They were the managers of Nina's work, and they've taken on a good portion of some of the efforts. We're getting a lot of assistance from DCA Legal and Gary Duke. I'm even having to do some of the workload myself in the interim, but we're forging ahead, and today's presentation will be provided by none other than me, so go lightly on me, please. But I'm going to have to, maybe I could just do it from here. I've got the presentation. Can I just point to you? And yeah, it's easier for me to, and next slide, I'll do that. So that's why you don't see Nina's name on the front page anymore, and we'll have someone named soon. Oh, we also have someone coming on board. I was successful in convincing and advocating for a regulations expert to specifically focus on the AB 873 and Senate Bill 778 issues that I want to, as I said, that I'm committed to trying to work through with this advisory group and other stakeholders to do much of in regulation. Dan, as I said, will come back to lead that effort, Dan Povey, but I also need someone who's skilled at the regulations and drafting and building consensus and working with stakeholders. And I'm very happy to announce that an individual hasn't been named. He hasn't been named yet, but we've just found someone to take on that limited term assignment. It's up to 2 years, and we'll have that person joining us. I think January 30th will be that person's first day. I'll put out an announcement to the Bureau staff probably next week about this person coming on board, and then I'll share it with the advisory group. but I think you'll all like him. He's got a lot of great experiences that'll lend itself to doing great work on this project. All right, I'm up. Thanks a lot, Nina. Just kidding. Well, there's only one bill right now that I wanted to bring to your attention. It was a bill from last year. I've already mentioned AB 873 and Senate Bill 778. But this bill, and there may have been some that have been introduced that we're going to be catching up to. If you want to bring them to our attention today as part of this presentation, by all means, please do. Senate Bill 1046, Cherry Hill's bill, ignition interlock devices. This was signed by the governor last year and chaptered. It essentially will require the Department of Motor Vehicles, who has taken the lead on this, on existing law. There was a 4-county pilot, I believe, that took us through the end of 2018, requiring ignition interlock devices to be installed in these 4 counties, one of which was Sacramento, I think Alameda, and I can't remember the other 2. For anyone who was convicted of a DUI, and there's probably some other requirements relating to that. But DMV is required to certify the devices, these ignition interlock devices, and the Bureau of Automotive Repair, as well as one other important regulatory body, the BEHRFT, Bureau for the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau for Electronic and Appliance Repair, Home Furnishings, and Thermal Insulation. That is a mouthful, I know, but that is the regulatory agency of which we speak. They are in charge of the alarm installer companies, Best Buy and so forth, that install these devices, regulating their proper installation, as is the Bureau of Automotive Repair for any automotive repair dealer doing this. Well, that pilot, that 4-county pilot that was going to end in 2018, has been extended statewide until 2026, as I recall. The important developments are, as we've already started sitting down with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Guess who is in charge of that? Tim Corcoran, who, as I mentioned earlier, he's the chief of the Occupational Licensing Division at DMV. He's been working with us and the chief of the BEHRFT group and some of their staff on laying out a strategy for implementing this this statewide enhancement or of this program. DMV is already scrutinizing certifications that have been issued to companies. We have, as our regulatory role, we've received a list. Manufacturers of these devices have to provide a list to the DMV. DMV's turned that list over to us, as well as BEHRFT, of those who are installing these devices. We don't have a good list of our own because no one puts on their registration application that that's their primary business or even their secondary business. So that information is only right now given to us by the Department of Motor Vehicles. But we are out there canvassing the list that has been provided. There was, I think, over 500 of the 35,000 automotive repair dealers or whatever it is in this state, about 500 plus that were on the list that are engaged in this type of business. We've already gone out and are in the process of surveying and asking questions like, are you doing it? And if you are, how often? What's the frequency? What standards are you applying towards the installation and those kind of questions? So we'll probably have more to report on that at our next advisory group meeting because that's still currently going on. Anyway, that's an important development, legislative development that I wanted to mention. We also have some regulations that I know you're all very interested in. Oh, is there a question you want to not wait till the end? I get it. Yeah, go ahead. Who was it? Oh,
Nikki has
Nikki.
a question.
I was looking at you. Go ahead, Nikki.
I do install those.
You're one of the 500 plus that hopefully that was on the DMV list.
And
This is all manufacturer, the ignition interlock device manufacturer provided list.
and when we had our visit from the bar rep, he told us this was going to be now a quarterly inspection.
I'm not aware of that, but we
Oh.
may have made that decision.
Okay, so I was kind of wondering if this is going to become a quarterly inspection, is there going to be like a sheet that we're going to go from, and how is this going to work?
I would probably advise something like that to our program reps to develop and program managers to develop something so we can have a consistent inspection if that's the case. I know that we initially just wanted to get a lay of the land, what's out there. But if we're looking at doing this, because there is heightened awareness about this, not just the certification and making sure that this equipment is correctly certified, but also the installation and the ongoing servicing and maintenance and calibration of these devices, because I think there is a regular
Right, and it depends
need
on
to
what
visit the shop that installed it.
Right, and it depends on the court order for the individual person and all of that.
And I feel like that's due to, back to the legislature specifically,
I
Senator
just
Hill
wondered
and the
what the
governor
shop
who
should
signed this.
expect, because you don't make a lot of money on these.
Sure. So we'll work on a consistent inspection report for that, so we don't have different questions or.
Okay, thank you.
Was there another question? No, you were just speaking up for Nikki. Thank you. I can't do all these things. Thank you for monitoring. I'm now Nina. You're now me. Who's going to take Jack's spot? Charlie. Oh, Nikki, if there's a button on the base of it, I don't know if it was on or not. Okay. And yes, good. Thank you very much. We definitely, with the webcast, want to make sure that not just those here physically present, but also those on the webcast can hear. And please introduce yourselves again, because it's hard to distinguish between voices. Okay. Regulations, mobile automotive repair advertising. We're kind of on hold, waiting to see the outcome of the AB 873 and SB 778, but also we were just very busy last year. These regulations would establish advertising requirements for mobile auto repair businesses, some of which are already registered with the Bureau. Probably a number of businesses that are not registered with the Bureau of Automotive Repair. We did a second 15-day renotice of that package. For anyone who's not familiar with the process of developing regulations, we do a lot of this work on the front end, working with our stakeholders, our advisory group. We then get to a point where we're ready to package it up. We go through a lot of internal reviews. We file it with the Office of Administrative Law, a regulation that we want to get implemented or adopted. And then we hold a 45-day public comment period, at which we usually hold one, maybe two hearings. It's usually in Sacramento, and maybe, if depending on the size or magnitude of it, we might hold a second hearing in the southern part of the state. You're not obliged or required to go to one of the public hearings in that 45-day period. You can submit written comments, but we package all of that information up, and then we send it back through our department and through the Office of Administrative Law to then have it reviewed and adopted, and then it gets officially filed with the Secretary of State's office. Sometimes, as is the case in this particular reg package, we find things through the hearing process or that 45-day public comment period where we want to make additional changes that were brought to our attention or came to light, things we didn't see or drafted in a certain way that we didn't intend. And this is the case in this regulation. We had something that we spotted during the first 45-day public comment period, so we reissued a 15-day, which is required. If you're going to make additional changes beyond your initial draft, you do a 15-day notice of it and give people an additional time to comment, not on the initial package that was the subject of the 45 days, but any of the changes that were made in that subsequent to that initial filing. Well, in this case, we found additional changes we want to make after the first 15 days, and we renoticed it to the public for a second 15 days. That ended and took place at the end of December, between the 16th and the 30th. We didn't receive any comments on those additional changes on the first changes. if that all makes sense. So we're now at DCA for our final review. I don't know where it is in the process at DCA. There's a lot of people that look at it, our budget office, our legislative office, our legal office, and then if all is copacetic with everyone, we will send it to OAL, and then it'll go to our agency, I think, in between that, and then it goes to OAL, and they hopefully will adopt it without any and not reject it. I think this is one that will be very beneficial to kind of, I think what the industry, the regulated industry was interested is making sure we had some requirements out there for those who are out there on Craigslist or what have you, advertising and not registered with the Bureau. And I know it only kind of is the tip of the iceberg. There's some other issues out there with respect to mobile auto repair that others and the advisory group has brought to my attention. I think we'll kind of get there eventually in addressing those. And we've talked about having something at our April meeting to talk about next steps, but this was kind of the first crack out of it at trying to address the initial issues that were brought to the Bureau's attention. All right, Bar 97 specifications update. This is to modernize the Bar 97 equipment standards for smog check stations. We're going to remove the dedicated analog phone line. We're going to integrate the LEPFET, the low pressure fuel evaporative test, into the Bar 97, so it won't be some standalone data collection that you then manually have to enter in the information or the results from that portion of the smog check for the older vehicles. And then we're going to update the hardware and software requirements. Status. We've had a workshop last October, after our last advisory group meeting. Sent out an ET blast on this. It's in our fall newsletter, and it's right now at DCA for formal review. I just signed the fiscal impact statement last Friday, and then the next step will be to file it with OAL. So that one's pretty far along as well, just like the auto repair advertising. Are we at formal review on that? No, that's a mistype. We're in informal review. So we haven't even done the official public comment period on that. So my mistake. Yes. I just noticed that, and I didn't spot that. We are just trying to we're going through an informal review with DCA, which is our first step, and then we will then send it out for a 45-day public comment period after OAL says they are ready to notice it. They don't? Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Yes. All right, let me get through this, and then we go back. I'm on the mic. I will. There's a correction to the slide on page 6, number 6 slide. It says we're in DCA formal review. We're actually in informal review, which is the point at which we get it reviewed before it's filed with the Office of Administrative Law, or OAL, to initiate that 45-day public comment period that I talked about. Next regulation, electronic documentation authorization. This has been in the works for a couple years or more. Thankfully, we're getting close to the end of the process. We, with this regulation, which was brought to our attention by the industry, kind of want to modernize the Automotive Repair Act and allow for the electronic authorization, transmission, storage of repair transaction documents. In the process of doing this was a fairly simple regulation that I thought we were kind of just putting Band-Aids in different areas of the regulations to implement various sections of the Automotive Repair Act. I thought we should probably reorganize those for the ease of understanding for consumers, the industry, and also our own personnel, our own employees. So we've reorganized the sections. We've tried not to remove anything. There may be some things that we thought were no longer needed or relevant, but we've reorganized the entire estimate, work order, and invoice provisions. So it more closely aligns with the automotive repair transaction, taking it from the moment the consumer steps into the shop all the way to the end of the repair. And then there's some clarifying language in certain parts. This is at DCA for formal review, as I understand it. We've had workshops on this. We've probably had at least 3. If not, I think there was a 4th one that isn't on this list. And then the next step would be to review it have it reviewed by agency. We've already gone through all of the public comment period, as I understand it, and then have that regulation adopted, hopefully, by mid-time this year. Brake and lamp stations and adjusters, we're going to update the handbooks and the licensing applications for brake and lamp adjusters and stations, and we're going to update the brake and lamp certificates. We had a public workshop on this following our last advisory group meeting in October. We're still finalizing the development of those regulations at BAR, and the next step would be to begin that informal review at DCA, and then get the filed at OAL, Office of Administrative Law, so we can begin that 45-day public comment period, that official comment period. STAR program cleanup. Legal counsel. Why don't you come up so we don't have a side discussion, Gary? I didn't intend for that. Gary,
I just wanted to clarify something with regards to the level of review by the Department of Consumer Affairs, because it is a little bit confusing just because of the nomenclature and the words we're using. There are 2 levels of formal review. One is before the regulation is actually noticed by the Office of Administrative Law as well as by the agency. So that level of review actually goes through the legal office as well as our legislative and regulatory division, and also goes up to review by what's called a state agency, and all that is initial before we even notice the regulation for formal comment review. That's the 45-day period that Mr. Darius is speaking of. After it goes through that level of review, as Mr. Darius mentioned earlier, there could be other changes that are made. We could have 15-day notices, other kinds of modifications. As a result, the regulations can evolve and change quite differently as it goes through the public comment and the further review process. After we've received all final public comment, then the regulation goes through another formal review, and this is the formal review for actually getting approval from the Office of Administrative Law and filing with the Secretary of State's office, and that's when the regulation becomes law. So I just wanted to clarify the fact that there are 2 levels of what we call formal review. Formal review really just means it's being reviewed by the Department of Consumer Affairs agency and the Department of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And I think we've always distinguished those. I think Nina put divided those formal reviews into, one was informal because it was prior to the actual filing for notification to the public. Prior to that was an informal review. Maybe we come up with something other. It's fairly confusing, and maybe we'll come up with something like a preliminary review and then a final review or something after it's been filed and it goes back to you. I don't know. We'll come up with something a little better because I think it is extremely confusing, even to myself. As Tracy said, a lot of reviews. Yes. How to make a law. STAR program, was I on that? Did I? Yeah. STAR program. How many more did Nina give me? 3 more. STAR program cleanup. We're going to delete the outdated provisions of the former Gold Shield program. They're still on the books, so to speak. We're going to update the STAR eligibility criteria. A lot of focus now, when this program was created initially, we still hadn't implemented the OBD provisions of AB 2289, so there's going to be more focus on that because, as I said, somewhere in the range of 70% of the vehicles are getting inspected that way. So a lot of the Bar 97 performance criteria, probably not as much weight necessarily going to be given on those, although there will be still some because there's a good portion of our clean air focus is going to be obviously on the older vehicles as well. We're going to revise some of the STAR suspension processes. Want to make sure it's more consistent with statute. I think currently we call it an invalidation, which was a carryover term from the old Gold Shield program, and that's more of a permanent decision without any flexibility to suspend, as the statute for STAR says. So I think we want to make sure we're consistent with that. A suspension could be very temporary in terms of someone's sitting on the sidelines, so to speak, waiting till their performance criteria is brought up. Maybe only till the next quarter. It could be the next within 30 days if you're going through an informal review before one of our hearing officers. So we're looking at all sorts of things to kind of make ourselves the Bureau's process with respect to the STAR program consistent with statute. We held a workshop in July of last year, and right now I just dropped that off with the department. It is in, I won't say informal, because you called that formal also, but preliminary review. We have not filed it yet with the Office of Administrative Law for public comment. Okay, certified school and instructor requirements. We're going to update the requirements for the certification of Smog Check training providers, create consistency with our current licensing requirements. As many of you know, we split the Smog Check license for the individual performing the Smog Check and repairs. That used to be one license. It's now 2 licenses. We now have a Smog Check inspector license and a Smog Check repair technician license. You can have both, or you can just have one. So some of the training requirements and that are in regulation for the providers are consistent with those developments. We're allowing for training to be what I call compliance training with our laws and regulations. There is not a provision necessarily for that. We sometimes get court-ordered decisions that say, or maybe we even have a case that's settled where we want training on our laws and regulations. There is no mechanism for that. And so I think if you build it, they will come. If we have something like this, maybe the training providers will have see the need to develop training along these lines. We're also we just right now have citation training. So if you get a citation, but there's nothing that where there's been court-ordered training to know the laws and regulations that your business is subject to. So I think we want to kind of call special attention to that. And there's obviously with that, some conforming changes that we have to make to the disciplinary guidelines. That is, we were fairly far along in getting those through to adoption, but we saw some changes that we wanted to make to the disciplinary guidelines, which, as you recall, we're going through the process a year or more ago. And so it was getting very confusing because we were trying to make changes to a package that was going forward to update our disciplinary guidelines with all the statutes that have been adopted over the last 15 years or more since the last change to our disciplinary guidelines. I just said, let's suspend the other changes that will be conforming to this package. So we suspended this review until we got the disciplinary guidelines through. As I said, we're going to restart that formal review. We've already done all the public comments period, and we'll probably have to renotice it because there were some additional changes that were made. Anyway, that's where we are with that. Licensing application updates. This is still very early on, and I didn't necessarily want to see this one on at this point. It's very early on in the development at BAR. I mean, we've done a lot of work, but we still have to go through our DCA review but we haven't even begun to publicly notice it. It's just going to update our licensing applications for smog check inspectors, repair technicians, and stations. I think it's just going to have some more user-friendly formatting of it. There's also going to be some requirements that we have to, that we want to call out for military, veterans, who are trying to get employed as inspectors. There are some new laws that allow for waivers of fees and expedited processing for anyone's looking to make that transition from their time in the military to a profession regulated by the Bureau of Automotive Repair, as well as other licensing professions at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Very early on in the development, still, I think we've got some good drafts, but still haven't gone very far at the DCA review process. Okay, any questions and comments? I'm going to deflect a lot of those to Tessa Miller. Tessa, can you raise your hand? That's her phone number. That's her email. Obviously, if you want to send something to me, I'll definitely try my best to respond. But as far as the status of something, Tessa's your best bet on that right now until we get our position that was last held and recently vacated by Nina filled. Sorry for the lengthy presentation, but I thought it was important to kind of bring everybody up to speed after our last meeting and obviously the changes that have gone on since our last meeting. Any comments, questions about the regulations from our advisory group? Okay. Charlie? Okay. Charlie, then Jean Lopez.
Wow, to get ahead of this guy. Wow, that's amazing. Anyway, Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals. There was a subject breached in a portion of the conversation that I was having difficulty hearing. But the issue was about pilot studies. Kind of appears as though pilot studies has become a huge door to creating legislation and policy that may or may not be appropriate. Such things as OBD3, huge amounts of cars being inspected on the highway that are not meeting our current rules and regulations. We're going around that. It was a pilot study that particularly gets my attention immediately in '93, discussed at the Ontario Bureau of Automotive Repair Office, agreeing to a pilot study of management to be started within 45 days, was agreed to. I'm still waiting for the 45-day period to end. But this issue of pilot studies needs to be a part of the discussion here as to what that means. We need a definition of what a pilot study is, and how long it lasts, and when it starts, and when it's over. Is this just a new way of doing legislation in California and creating regulations and laws? That makes me very uncomfortable and needs some additional consideration. Passing laws and doing things outside of the rules and regulations of the state, I think, need some further consideration, sir.
All right, thank you. Gene Lopez.
Hi, good morning. Gene Lopez with Side Nurse Collision Center. Regarding the electronic documentation and authorization, we're a facility with 14 locations, and we have about close to 18,000 repair orders a year. And that means archiving all these documents. Just to be clear, are we now prepared to store all these archives electronically? Scan an RO, shred all that, give the consumer the authorization, or give the consumer their final invoice, and then store that electronically? Is that what this is saying?
Yes, that's where we're hoping to go with this regulation. Yeah.
And we can do that today?
I don't know. Well, the regulation has been adopted. I don't know. Is there anything preventing electronic storage at this point? Or no?
Great.
This just probably brings some more clarity to the issue.
Yeah, I mean, our warehouse, when we have almost 600 banker boxes a year, our warehouse is exhausted at this point.
I think it's more focused on the electronic estimate
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the authorization
Yeah.
of that through various media. Not just your traditional hard copy, wet signature, fax. We now allow for telephone. We have for a long time telephonic. I think we've got documentation through email or texting or whatever that you can build a file with much better even than just the documentation from a phone conversation where you still have the he said, she said
Right.
issues. So
Right.
anyway,
Oh, thanks for that clarification.
Tracy Renee.
Tracy Renee with the Automotive Service Councils of California. So did I just hear that correctly, that you no longer have to keep your hard copies and you can just scan them and store everything electronically
Well,
right now?
This regulation has been adopted, so if it's the case that you can do that, and I'm deferring to my field management, if that's the case, it's always been the case because this regulation hasn't been adopted. Anyone? Yes. Yes, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 program managers nodding their head. So I think there's been just a terrible misunderstanding about the fact that, and maybe it's because all of the front end paper requirements that maybe someone thought that carried all the way through to storage, but I don't know. I don't know how we got here, but hopefully this regulation will clear that up. But yes, I think there is allowing for the electronic storage. I don't know. I guess you would take the hard copies information that you get and you'd have to scan it and then electronically store it. But if you can provide that information to us, by all means, certainly probably much easier to keep and produce. You've got, I don't know what you can have. All sorts of natural disasters that could wipe out hard copy files, right? Just look at the rains in this area.
Not to speak for the departments of Jonathan Morrison Auto Advisory Services, but I think the general understanding, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is that the department will recognize, or the bureau will recognize electronically scanned documents, but they got to be the actual scanned documents with the wet ink signatures on there, and all technician notes and the like. It can't just be that internal file that's printed out. So you can prove that the customer did authorize specific repairs. And I think that had been the understanding in general.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was Jonathan Morrison with Auto Advisory Services. Anybody else? Good. Yes, go ahead, George.
George Ritz, California Automotive Teachers. On the school and instructor requirements, did I understand that you're thinking that the schools, the institutions will develop courses for training on laws and regulations for somebody other than a smog technician that has been?
Could be. Yes, it could be. I mean, again, that's kind of if you build it, they will come. I hope that doesn't necessarily it'll happen, but making it known that that's an interest of the bureaus by having it in our regulations, hopefully we'll see that. And if it's ordered by the courts, that kind of thing, working together, we probably can, through our educational advisory group, we might be able to get there, yes. And it wouldn't be just focused solely on Smog Check. I hope that's not the intent with this package. If it is, or if that's what it does, I would like to expand on that, but I think it was much broader than that.
Thank you.
More item.
Yeah.
Getting back to the electronic storage of the original documents, as Jonathan had pointed out, just recently I was talking with a member that they had been doing that, scanning the documents, saving the original documents, and shredding the originals because now they had them electronically, only to have a virus introduced into their system that wiped out their hard drive. And so I think part of something we might want to consider is coming up with some type of template on some type of redundancy system that not only has it stored in one electronic place, but an alternate cloud or whatever, because I can just imagine that type of situation where it would just be horrific to try and figure out what do you do now when all of a sudden you get a request for documents from the Bureau and you end up in a situation like this. So maybe something in the future we can discuss in another session.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to follow up on that briefly, and I had conversations about that. I think it's similar to the risk of having your files, that you have in a warehouse burned down. If you can't produce the documents, you can't produce the documents. It's definitely a good idea to have an offsite backup storage system, either in your home if you got a thumb drive or something like that with all of your scanned files. But I think the risk is on the repair facility. If they're going to be keeping things electronically, you got to make sure that those are going to be accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right. Now I know my goal to fill Nina's position is by the next advisory group meeting. On my to-do list. All right. Our next presentation is from Clay Leak on the Cal Vista project. Thank you, Clay, for waiting so patiently. What's that?
I have another one anyways.
Oh, yeah, you do. You did. You're on twice. Yeah, back to back. Clay Leak with our Technology Services branch.
Morning. Thank you, Pat. My name is Clay Leak with the Information Technology Services branch. Just here to give you a quick update on our Cal Vista project. And in fact, before I forget, David, where's David Waters? I will be introducing David shortly, and going forward, I'll actually get to share this presentation with him, so a little bit less work for me.
Thank you, Clay.
So real quickly, just to summarize the scope, again, our primary objectives here were to negotiate the ownership of the system, the California Vehicle Inspection System, refresh the system to a state-owned data center, and in parallel with those activities, publish a request for proposal, an RFP, to obtain follow-on maintenance and operation services that are currently supported by SGS Testcom, our vendor. So good news in terms of status. We've had a lot of progress over the last quarter. We do have an updated contract, an amended statement of work with our vendor, SGS Testcom. It was approved and executed on December 1st, and it goes through November 30th of 2018. This amendment to the contract supports all of the goals and objectives of our project, which includes taking ownership of all the equipment and all the software, and also moving all that equipment and software to a state-owned data center. David Waters is here representing SGS. He's the SGS program manager. Moving forward, he'll be helping kind of present the status. Obviously, a lot of the work to move this equipment over to OTEC is the responsibility of SGS now. So they'll be here kind of representing and providing status on the pieces of the project that they're working on. Additionally, a few more professional services contracts that have been executed. We have an independent verification and validation consultant that is brought on board and is getting engaged on the project. We have a test lead that we will be onboarding very soon in the next few weeks. The contract has been awarded, so we're excited to get those resources on board and working on the project. We've additionally started work on the move to OTEC. A good percentage of the equipment has been purchased. A good percentage of the software has been purchased. I kind of explicitly mentioned here the Oracle Exadata hardware, which is a new database platform we're really excited about. And then in terms of the RFP, I can share that we are meeting 3 to 4 days a week for 4 to 5 hours at a time, and putting in a lot of work getting that document to the finish line. So in terms of next steps, obviously a lot of work still to go on the RFP to get that out the door. The other thing I will mention about the RFP is we recently received formal approval from our oversight, California Department of Technology State Procurement Division, on our overall procurement approach, the procurement documentation, and the steps we plan to execute as part of this procurement and this solicitation. So that's a big milestone and gives us a lot of confidence in our kind of existing timelines now that we've received that approval from our oversight. So obviously continuing the move to OTEC, we're working on establishing our project management processes, establishing a project baseline, creating work breakdown structures, detailed schedules, all that stuff. Going to complete the remaining procurement, few items left to procure, and onboard the 2 or 3 remaining resources that were not scheduled to kind of come on board on day one. So in terms of kind of mapping back to our baseline dates, at this point, we look to be about 6 weeks behind the schedule we published a year and a half ago as part of the FSR. So we're pretty much right on track where we want to be. The last chunk here is kind of where I'll hand it off to David, and if you're ready to say a few words, that'd be great. And if not, that's fine too. We can wait for the next quarter.
Okay.
But you know, from here on out, the trick here is to kind of control and manage the work. You know, I say this a lot with project management, but the goal is to know you're late as soon as possible in the process so you can take corrective action and get yourself back on track. So that's where we're going to work real closely with SGS, TESCOM in terms of controlling and managing this work and making sure we get it done on time and on schedule and with the appropriate amount of quality. So with that, I'll turn it over to David.
Couple sentences.
Sure.
Hello, everybody. My name is David Waters. I am currently the California Program Manager for assisting Clay to make sure this project is successful. At the same time, we keep the California Smog Inspection System running 24/7 since 2006. So the challenge for any kind of IT project like this is that it's a lot of work and there's unexpected situations that occur. So we've been working with Clay over the last year and a half to plan for reducing that risk and mitigating it, like Clay mentioned, in advance and having contingencies that kick in. So typical project management emphasis. And I'm encouraged that we have additional labor we brought on our side last year to train them up to help with continuing operations and maintenance. And the experts that have been running the system for 5 years, 10 years are going to be focused on creating the new iteration of it that will be the state-owned equipment and data center locations. So that's a very exciting thing for me that the risk is reduced in this IT project more so than in some that I've been worked on in the past. The last thing I'll mention, and I'll talk more about more information in 3 months when we do this again, is that we have also Clay especially, and Pat and Dennis and everyone involved with the planning has decided we're going to freeze the application as much as possible. It's very stable. 2013 was the last major change to do a lot of OBD testing through new web-based software. And so that means that we can minimize the changes in software while we're doing this hardware network infrastructure project. And that's the other thing that will reduce the risk of missing the dates. So thank you very much, and I will entertain any questions. Otherwise, I'll talk to you again in 3 months when there'll be even more information about the next 3 months worth of progress.
We got a couple more slides here I'll knock out, and then we can certainly address any questions for David or myself. We've kind of continued, and I know Pat kind of touched on this as part of the regulations presentation as well. Obviously, getting the legacy Bar 97 analyzers off of dial-up and over to the internet is a big part of this project. That is actually kind of one of the first big chunks of work that we've actually gotten started with. We're in the process of doing the work we need to do on our side, and certainly the Bar 97 manufacturers are in process of doing the work that they need to do on their side. We've developed several communication specifications and have been working with them very closely to get that done. So that'll occur early in 2017. And again, we continue to have quality of service issues, obviously, that this internet connectivity is going to help us alleviate. And Pat kind of touched on the status of the regulations, so I won't try to clarify formal versus informal versus formal or any of that, because I don't know that I know either. And I touched on the communication specification. The first large deliverable as part of this is establishing a test environment that we can actually start, testing Bar 97 connectivity over the internet. So we're expecting to do that in early March. And again, I briefly mentioned the timelines. We've had about a 6-week slide to the critical path, so we're right on track. In terms of state projects, 6 weeks is we're early in my opinion. So, and that's all we've got. Any questions or comments?
Anyone from the advisory group? Audience? Anyone on the webcast? We get anything? Okay. Thank you very much, Clay. David, looking forward to working with you and seeing you at future meetings, of course. I do have to go back. We did get a question on one of the regulations, the STAR program in particular. Jerry Esme wrote a fairly lengthy question. I'm not sure I need to repeat it completely here and take up any more time, but Jerry Esme, a former Bureau employee, Fresno field office? He had a question that I think we'll follow up with, have Garrett Torgerson from our engineering branch follow up with him. He just basically asked, as I understand it, a news station cannot have in the smog machines any technician with a score less than 0.4. If this is so, I have the following concerns, but that is not necessarily the case. That's your get-in score for the STAR as a technician. I think once it drops below 0.1, then there's an issue. Anyway, he had some recommendations or suggestions potentially on that. So if we make any changes to the regulations, we'll certainly keep everyone involved. Thank you, Jerry. Good to see you're still out there and focused on the smog program. Thank you. All right, our next presentation. Online license renewal. Clay, you disappeared. He likes the grand introductions, I guess. Clay Leak, Bar Technology Services Branch.
All right. Clay Leak again with Technology Services Branch. So I'm here to provide some good news and announce some new functionality is available for our licensees. Hopefully one that will provide them a level of convenience in terms of renewing their licenses that they have not had previously. So going back about a year, we started a project with the objective to allow bar licensees to renew both business and personal licenses online. In today's world, certainly a more convenient process for most people to go ahead and be able to do that sort of thing online. You've seen it with DMV, you've seen it with numerous other state agencies. For us, it certainly has some advantages as well in terms of faster processing time and reduced staff time to process renewals, less paper, less phone calls and confusion about where licenses are, and a really long, what can be a fairly long paper process to get renewed. So although I'm the one up here kind of giving this update, I actually did very little of the work. So I did want to give some credit to the project team before going too much further. Our bar licensing unit did a lot of the heavy lifting here in terms of defining, the business processes and making sure we were able to process these documents in an efficient manner. I don't know did Frenchie make it? She did not. I thought she was going to come. Frenchie was kind of our key from the bar licensing team, so I will mention her. Our bar program support unit also provided a lot of help on this. Tessa Miller, I know, is here. And her unit was very helpful with the website layout, the pre-qualifying questions, and kind of helping us manage this project day to day. DCA accounting played a key role as well. A big part of this is actually processing the records, which I'll kind of show how that process works towards the tail end of this. DCA Office of Information Systems, basically the technology side for DCA provided a lot of support and guidance, as there are several other boards and bureaus that leverage a similar process to this as well. I do mention my group, the Bar Technology Services Branch, who helped us kind of build the web page and some of the front-end functionality. And finally, our third-party provider, who actually does process the credit cards for us, which is a third-party company called Official Payment Center. And I'll walk you through how this all works from the licensee's perspective. In terms of licenses and scope, it's pretty much every license type that we support. So here, just kind of a short list of the different personal and business licenses. So other considerations, I did mention there's a third party processing this credit card. It allows us to kind of defer some of the topics around security and storing credit card numbers to an entity that does that professionally, that does that for a living. So there is a small convenience fee, which I believe is $1, that's passed on directly to the licensee when they renew. BAR is absorbing all the credit card fees associated with that transaction. So kind of from the financial perspective, that's how that works. The other piece worth mentioning, so when the licensee comes to BAR's website, which is where they need to start, you go through that in more detail in a second. So I'll just briefly mention, we are relying on the licensee to self-certify that they are eligible to renew online. if they owe bar money, if their license is, if they just renewed it 3 days ago and they attempt to renew it again, it's not going to work. We're going to allow them to pay their fees. We're going to allow them to renew, but then that record's going to be flagged and we're going to have to fix it after the fact.
Also, the fact that, the answers to some of those questions, like is your license in good standing? Have you ever had that license revoked? That can hold up your license renewal just as it can in a paper processing today.
Absolutely, and we'll actually walk through the website and show you guys those questions. But the licensee is kind of obligated. They can not tell the truth on the question, get through and renew the license, which will cause some problems down the stream. So let's go ahead and pull up BAR's website, Sergi, if you don't mind. We've actually included the screenshots in the slide deck, which will kind of give you a place to start, maybe not the full flow, but
to pull this up, this has been a very soft start to this. I don't know that we've had more than 20 people kind of stumble upon it. We are looking to make a larger announcement, starting with this advisory group meeting. Hopefully the word will spread. We'll do an ET blast. We'll put it in the BAR the BAR newsletter, which the next one isn't until the summer. We're also looking at putting an insert in the renewal notices that the courtesy notices that, is it EDD? Employment Development Department sends out?
I believe so, yeah.
So we're going to look at putting an insert to kind of promote it. It obviously doesn't take away someone's ability to still do the hard copy renewal.
So from our homepage, if you go to the industry tab and click it, you can see right there at the top, new online license renewal payment is now available. So you can click that link. At which point you will select which license type you would like to renew. Which license type you select will determine which set of pre-qualifying questions you are asked. So we do have kind of some of the information that obviously a licensee should read and make sure they understand before proceeding. There's a description of how long, what to expect in terms of durations for these renewals. And then here is the set of questions for this particular license type. So if your license is current, does it expire within the next 90 days? If not, you're not eligible to renew. If your license is expired, did it expire less than 1 year ago? So we're going to indicate the license is current. If you've changed your business name recently, we're obviously going to have problems processing this electronically because there's going to be a mismatch between the name of your business and the new name of your business, which takes a little bit of time to process. And then finally, if you've made other changes to your business entity, that may impact the renewal as well. And then last two questions. If you're on probation, you're not eligible to renew online. And if you owe BAR any cost recovery, you are not eligible to renew online. So at this point, we are automatically redirected to OPC's website, at which point you will again select California, select your payment type and your license type. And you don't have to click make a payment, but at which point OPC will process your credit card payment. And at the end of the day, OPC will send a batch file over to BAR with all the records of the individuals that have renewed, and we will process it. The records that are flagged as problem records, we'll have to address one at a time. We see about 1% to 2% of those come back generally because people either answered the questions incorrectly or other issues with their renewal. So that's about it. Really happy to get this up and running. We anticipate a real high adoption rate, which is why we kind of had the slow start. Pat mentioned we wanted to make sure everything was working properly, and so we're up to about 40 or 50 records, and everything seems to be working really well. So.
Hello, hello. Okay. Any questions from the advisory group or comments? Yes.
First, I'll go.
Jonathan.
I'll go last.
First of all, this is awesome. Thank you, and congratulations getting this done. And so this is all up and live. We can tell folks to go ahead and renew online. That's you're going to have a lot of customer satisfaction there. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, you said there was a click through on, if there was a change in ownership. Let's say you had 3 corporate owners listed and one of them dropped off. You got a new person in. Can you change that online as well? I know it'll lead to delays, but is there functionality for that, or do you still have to go the paper route?
I'm not sure I 100% understand the question.
So one of the buttons to click was, is your ownership, has there been a change in ownership?
Yes.
If you click yes on that, does it allow you to update
No.
that information? Okay, so you
No.
still have to go through the process there.
Yes,
Got it.
correct.
Okay, great.
Yeah, this is, for the boards and bureaus that were phase 1 or phase 2 for Breeze, obviously this is functionality that's included in that system. It's more of a payment portal, more than a completely integrated online system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got it. That's awesome, though.
Yes.
Still, this is great. Thank you.
It's better than nothing.
And in time, we might get there, but yeah, this is a good first step. Thank you very much, Clay. And John or Johan?
Yeah, just real quick, and Jonathan touched on it. I know we were part of the Breeze project, and that kept getting pushed, and so I don't even know if we're still going to be part of Breeze in the future. But I agree with Jonathan. This is a great step, and I don't know where the future is as far as Breeze, but maybe you know or don't know.
I would probably defer to the department in terms of plans for Breeze.
I'll take that.
Certainly at some point, we're going to have to look at the licensing system. It's old, obviously, right? That's why the impetus for Breeze. So at some point, BAR and the other boards and bureaus that are not on Breeze will have to look at modernizing that system. What that entails, I don't know, but we're going to have to cross that bridge at some point, yeah.
I think this is a great step. Thanks, Clay.
Thank you, guys.
Question?
Jack.
Thanks, Clay. Yeah, I do think this is a great tool for automotive repair dealers. I just have a couple questions. So the trigger in my mind is when you called it a courtesy notice, but a notice goes out to the shops to renew. That's how they know how to renew. Otherwise, maybe some do calendar it, but generally they don't. So they get this notice. So in terms of time frame, that notice, is that something that's sent out within the 90 days, or how do you know in terms of the notice and how that works?
I'm not overly familiar with the business process. That would probably be more of our licensing. If Frenchie was here, I'm sure she could answer that question. Certainly I believe it goes out right around that 90-day period, because obviously they're not allowed to renew prior to that 90-day period. So I don't know how much good it would do sending it out prior to the 90 days, but we could certainly follow up on that question for you.
And the reason I ask is I know that in the past there was some inconsistency. You mentioned courtesy. I thought it was mandatory to go out, and I know some shops never receive it, and so I just wanted to clarify on that. So they send out does this notice come from the BAR, or does it come from someplace else?
It's EDDA, as I recall.
I apologize. I'm not super familiar with the licensing process, just kind of not my world.
Okay, that's fine.
I guess the focus on courtesy is you're still subject to renewing your registration if just like your registration for your vehicle, if DMV somehow it gets lost in the mail, you still need to know that your registrations are going to be expired, whether it be your professional license in this case or your vehicle's license.
I do like the idea in that notice, and if you have to work with EDD to put something in there that now you can renew online. Now, I saw you were going through the process, and it said $200, which is for the ARD, is a $200 annual registration fee. Is there, if you charge with credit card, do they charge you additional convenience fees, or is there a fee involved in that?
Yes, there is a convenience fee that OPC charges the licensee, which is $1. BAR is absorbing the credit card fees associated with each transaction.
Oh, okay. So the shop just pays $200, and you guys
plus $1 for OPC.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, is there in this process, have you looked at whether you can actually apply online for a BAR registration? Has that been talked about?
For an initial?
Yes.
That has not been discussed.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any others?
Really quick. So let's say I've got my license renewal notice. I forget about it. My license expires tomorrow. I go online. I renew my license. Is there a temporary, printout that would be posted, or you still got to wait for the license to come, the registration to come in the mail?
You would have to wait, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And is the time frame for renewal online versus by mail? Do you have a sense of that?
I believe the time frame, and again, I'm not super familiar with the business process. I believe right now it's 6 to 8 weeks, and for a paper renewal, this obviously is quite a bit quicker.
But it's obviously uploaded overnight.
Right.
Our field reps going out can definitely check the system before they say, "Oh, your license is expired." We want to make sure, and then we'll observe. We should be observing the fact that that license is current. Yeah, I would expect the shop to have the owner to have or manager to have that discussion, saying, "I just went online yesterday. I'm waiting in the mail for my renewal, my official certificate, or whatever you want to call it, renewal certificate."
And in that scenario, our internal bar applications would be aware that your renewal has been processed. So a bar employee would be able to verify that was true or not. Yeah.
That was Jonathan Morrison, Jack Molodanoff right before him, and then right before Jack was Johan Gallo. Thank you, Clay.
Thank you.
Good job. You're getting applause.